might have a really good run in here, but then you look at the run and you're like, well, we could have that one death. That's definitely 5 seconds we could have saved, plus maybe a couple seconds to have to res the person. Are we really happy with this run, even though it was perfect outside of that?
Yeah. All right, so top right-hand side of the screen, we have Reload Esports. They're doing a really good job of trying to set up all of these stealth claws with these Ether Divers. And you see the Ether Divers are now coming in really late into this pack. Those are going to be bolstered, I think. This...
Oh, well...
Well...
let's see how they're actually able to deal with this, right? They have to really focus the skirmishers down. Simpkins dying there is not
a town portal angle.
This is definitely a town portal angle. Yeah, everyone going down quickly. Wipe it up. Go next. Not exactly great, but they're still learning there. We're also having some learning in the bottom right side from practice there. You can see they were 4 minutes into their other side run, and they were dealing with a car, not the normal route that we're used to seeing. So more practice there for practice, and then also more practice runs coming in the bottom left there for evolving, wiping to the first boss. So teams are getting into dungeons that they really haven't put too much time into and figuring out how some of these pulls work, similar to what we saw at the beginning of yesterday in those Halls of Atonements. And it's interesting to see that they're still having trouble figuring out these routes and these affixes, even though we're in day 2 and they've had time to go through their MDTs, figure out their routing, and plan their cooldown usage.
Yeah, and I think it just like... So we're seeing slight discrepancies in composition, we're seeing slight discrepancies in routing, and ultimately I think a lot of it's based off of what these teams are comfortable with and kind of what they prepared whenever their respective cup weekends were. So everybody was doing something a little bit different at the very beginning of the season in Cup A, and so then you have teams like Evolving. You have teams like Evolving
Yes.
doing something like... Did you see what just happened to practice?
Yep. I saw. It's a go next angle. It happens. We're not going to talk about it. Just swiftly move on.
All right. Anyways, yeah. So you have Evolving trying to learn a different strategy because their practice for Cup A was such a long time ago that they're learning different routes that have evolved over the course of these other weekends. And whereas whenever you have teams like Practice and Omega Pump, who are here more recently, their strategies are more up to date, is how I would describe them. At least they're a lot more refined as the meta had evolved over the course of a few weeks.
Yeah, no, I think that's definitely a big factor coming into this, right? What the teams had time to practice with in their cups coming into this, what they're more familiar with. There are definitely very good things, like for instance, Omega Pump in this Theater of Pain having very similar affixes in their run means it's a dungeon that they're more intimately familiar with and are comfortable running, which is why we see them in here so often trying to iterate on and improve their time. I mean, it makes total sense to me, right? If they could get an 18-minute run in here, then their 19 or so minute run is not something that I'd be happy with, especially since they've already put so many times up in other dungeons that are pretty competitive with ambition, right? They are still going to go back into some, for instance, the Spires get a little bit of a faster time there. Go back into the Halls, get a little bit of a faster time there. They still do have to put up a time in DOS completely, right? They haven't really run that dungeon much. But all in all, they're not that far behind. Going back to that 2.5 hours per dungeon mark that we were talking about yesterday,